Okay, America, buckle up, because our history textbooks are basically a hall of fame for absolute clowns. We gave these people statues, we named mountains after them, we made kids memorize their names, and half of them didn't earn it. They embarrassed their way into it. We're talking about a country that once lost an entire standoff to a single pig. A genius who sold his piece of apple for 800 bucks. 800. And a doctor who got rich and almost ran a whole state by shoving goat testicles into people. These are the legends? These are the guys in the books? So I dug up 71 of the dumbest, most embarrassing, most how did nobody stop this moments in American history, and I ranked them. And I promise you number 1 is going to break your brain. Subscribe right now so you don't rage quit before the top 10. Drop a comment with the one they should have left out of the textbook, and let's get into it. 1. Ratathor. Picture this, a health tonic that's just radium dissolved in water, and rich people paid good money to drink it. One millionaire loved the stuff so much he chugged bottle after bottle, convinced it made him a superhuman. Instead, it slowly ate his jaw off, his actual jaw. It fell apart while he was still alive, and then it killed him. And the best part? It was completely legal. You could walk into a store and buy glowing death by the case. Somewhere, a marketing guy called this wellness. Your ancestors drank radiation for their health and called doctors crazy. Incredible instincts. 2. In 1919, Boston got attacked by breakfast. A giant storage tank full of molasses burst open and sent a 25-foot wave of the stuff tearing through the streets at 35 miles an hour. Let me repeat that. A tsunami of syrup, moving faster than you drive on the highway. It flattened buildings, crushed a firehouse, and killed 21 people. 21. Death by pancake topping. People genuinely drowned in something you put on waffles. And for years afterward, locals swore the whole neighborhood still smelled sweet on hot days. History's deadliest condiment, and it's not even close. Sleep tight knowing dessert once declared war. 4. So prohibition rolls around, and Americans keep drinking anyway. Does the government shrug and give up? No. They decide the solution is to literally poison the alcohol. They ordered industrial alcohol laced with deadly chemicals, knowing full well people would still drink it. And drink it they did. An estimated 10,000 of them died. 10,000 citizens murdered by their own government over a cocktail. Let that sink in. The people sworn to protect you decided the punishment for a beer was death. And they did it on purpose, with paperwork. This wasn't a mistake, this was policy. Founding fathers weeping in their graves somewhere, honestly. 5. George Washington, father of the nation, gets a sore throat. Just a throat thing. Annoying, sure, but survivable, unless you live in 1799, where the finest doctors in America gather around and decide the cure is to drain his blood. Not a little, about 40% of it. Nearly half the man's blood deliberately removed, because these geniuses believed less blood equals more health. Shockingly, the guy who founded your country was dead by morning, killed not by disease, but by the world's most confident idiots holding knives. And these are the medical minds your textbooks salute. Modern medicine started with vampires who read the manual upside down. 6. Meet Mike. Mike was a chicken. One ordinary day, a farmer chopped Mike's head clean off for dinner. Completely standard chicken business. Except Mike didn't get the memo and refused to die. He lived for 18 more months, a year and a half, headless. The farmer fed him with an eyedropper straight down the neck hole and took him on a national tour as Miracle Mike. People paid actual money to gawk at a chicken running around with no head. And honestly, Mike, headless, still accomplished more than most people do with a full skull. Legend has it, he even outlived his own obituary. 7. Kodak invented the digital camera. In 1975, one of their own engineers built the first one, walked it into the boardroom, and showed the executives the entire future. And what did these visionaries do? They buried it. Panicked that it might hurt their precious film sales, they locked the future in a drawer and pretended it didn't exist. Then the rest of the world invented it anyway, everyone went digital, and Kodak, the company that literally held tomorrow in its hands, went bankrupt. They saw the iceberg, steered directly at it, and hit the gas. A masterclass in fumbling greatness while congratulating yourself for it. 8. It's 1943, and a U.S. Navy destroyer is escorting a battleship carrying President Roosevelt himself. the commander-in-chief on board, protected by the finest sailors America has. Then, during a routine drill, that very destroyer accidentally fires a live torpedo, a real one, straight at the ship carrying the president, their own president. The most dangerous weapon on the ocean, launched at the exact man they were sworn to guard. They scrambled. The battleship swerved, and by pure luck, Roosevelt survived. But for a few glorious seconds, the U.S. Navy nearly deleted its own commander-in-chief. Friendly fire taken to a truly historic level. 9. A man named John Brinkley figured out the cure for male impotence, and the cure was, brace yourself, goat testicles. He surgically implanted actual goat glands into men, promising it would restore their vigor. It did nothing, obviously, except make him fabulously rich off desperate customers. But here's the kicker. This goat gland con man became so beloved that he nearly got elected governor of Kansas. Governor? An entire state looked at the guy stuffing livestock parts into people and thought, yeah, leadership material. He fumbled the election, but not by much. America came thrillingly close to being run by a man whose resume was mostly goats. 10. Lewis and Clark set off to explore the American frontier, and they packed a very special supply, mercury laxatives. Enormous industrial strength ones, so violently powerful they'd clear a man out instantly. The explorers took them constantly. Now, here's the beautifully disgusting part. That mercury passed straight through them and into the ground at every campsite. So today, over 200 years later, archaeologists literally find where Lewis and Clark stopped by testing the soil for toxic mercury. Their trail of legendary discovery is, quite literally, a trail of poisoned bathroom breaks. The greatest expedition in American history mapped by following the diarrhea. 11. Robert E. Lee had a genius secret battle plan before Antietam. The entire Confederate strategy written down top secret, guard it with your life. So naturally, somebody wrapped those plans around 3 cigars and then just lost them. In a field, where a random Union soldier stumbled across them like loose change on the sidewalk. The most important document of the campaign, delivered gift wrap to the enemy with a smoke on the side. Lee's whole plan, exposed because someone treated it like napkin for their tobacco. Losing your car keys is embarrassing. Losing the war because you misplaced your cigar wrapper is a special kind of legendary. 12. Andrew Jackson had a pet parrot named Pole, and he taught that bird to curse. Trained it. Filled its little brain with the foulest language a president could muster. Fast forward to Jackson's own funeral. Solemn occasion, everyone dressed in black grieving the man, and the parrot starts unloading. Swearing so loudly, so viciously at the president's own funeral that they had to physically remove the bird from the room so people could mourn in peace. Jackson's final act on this earth was a parrot screaming profanity over his casket. Somewhere he was proud. That's not a pet, that's a legacy with feathers. 13. In 2000, Blockbuster, king of the video store, master of the late fee, got offered the chance to buy Netflix. The price? $50 million, a rounding error for a company that size. And Blockbuster's executives basically laughed them out of the building, treating Netflix like a cute little joke that would never amount to anything. Well, Netflix is now worth hundreds of billions, and Blockbuster is a single sad store in Oregon that people visit ironically. They had the future begging to be bought and chuckled at it. The most expensive laugh in corporate history. Hope those late fees were worth it, geniuses. 14. Walter Freeman had a medical breakthrough, and by breakthrough, I mean he jammed an ice pick into people's eye sockets. He called it a lobotomy, performed thousands of them, and did it with the enthusiasm of a man who'd found his calling. He toured the entire country doing these on the spot, in a van he personally nicknamed the Lobotomobile. A van. He drove around America scrambling brains out of a vehicle he named like an ice cream truck, and people lined up. Textbooks call him a pioneer. I call him the guy who turned ruining lives into a road trip with excellent branding. 15. Zebulon Pike found a beautiful mountain out west, decided to climb it, and failed miserably. Couldn't make it up. Fine, mountains are hard, no shame there. But Pike didn't stop at failure. He announced that since he couldn't climb it, nobody ever could. Declared it flat out impossible for any human being, forever. That mountain is now named Pike's Peak, after him, and it has a road to the top. and a train. Tourists in flip-flops reached the summit daily while sipping lemonade. His one lasting contribution was being spectacularly, permanently wrong about the exact thing named after him. Confidence and competence, sadly, are not the same skill. 16. Al Capone ran the deadliest crime empire in America. Murders, bootlegging, bribery, violence on an industrial scale. The man was a walking crime wave in a nice suit. The FBI wanted him desperately. And after all the bodies, all the bloodshed, all the mayhem, do you know what finally put Al Capone behind bars? Taxes. Unpaid taxes. Not the killing, not the smuggling. Paperwork. The most feared gangster in history was taken down by an accountant, not a detective. Turns out you can order 100 hits and walk free, but skip your tax return and it's over. Somewhere, the IRS still brags about this one. 17. There is a town in Pennsylvania called Centralia, and underneath it, the ground is on fire. Not for a day, not for a year, since 1962. A coal seam beneath the town caught fire over 60 years ago, and it has been burning non-stop ever since, with no way to put it out. Smoke seeps up through cracks in the roads, the earth is hot to the touch, and the town basically had to be abandoned to hell itself. People literally live on top of an eternal underground bonfire, and it's expected to keep burning for another 200 years. Real estate values, understandably complicated. 18. During the War of Currents, Thomas Edison wanted everyone to fear his rival's version of electricity. So Edison, celebrated genius, face of American invention, decided the best marketing strategy was to publicly electrocute animals. In front of crowds. He'd zap them dead to prove the competing current was dangerous, staging grim little execution shows like some Victorian supervillain. This is the man on the pedestal in your textbook, the great inventor. Turns out his big idea for winning a business dispute was a body count of innocent creatures. Nothing says, "Trust my light bulb," like a public animal execution. Marketing has come a long way, thankfully. 19. At the Battle of the Crater, Union soldiers had a brilliant plan. Dig a tunnel under the enemy line, pack it with explosives, and blow a massive hole in the Confederate defenses. And it worked. The blast tore open a giant gap and a huge smoking crater. Perfect opportunity. So what did the Union troops do? They charged directly into the pit, into the hole, where they stood at the bottom while the enemy calmly walked to the edge and shot down at them like fish in a barrel. They turned their own genius victory into a shooting gallery, and they were the targets. Flawless. Execution of the worst possible instinct. 20. William Henry Harrison became president and wanted to make a strong first impression, so he delivered the longest inaugural speech in American history. Nearly 2 hours. Out in the freezing cold, no coat, no hat, just vibes and endless talking. Very impressive, very presidential. It also gave him pneumonia. 31 days later, he was dead. The longest speech in history bought him the shortest presidency in history. He talked himself quite literally into an early grave, and his entire legacy is a cautionary tale about knowing when to wrap it up. Somewhere, an editor is screaming, "You had one job, be brief." 21. When the telephone was invented, its owners offered the patent to Western Union, the biggest communications company in America, kings of the telegraph. They could have bought the rights to the telephone outright and owned the future of human conversation. Instead, they reportedly dismissed it as a useless toy. A gimmick. A silly little novelty that would never catch on. Meanwhile, that toy became the single most important device on the planet for the next century. Western Union looked at the future ringing in their hand and hung up on it. Every phone call ever made is a monument to the dumbest no thanks in business history. 22. Back in 1885, if your kid had a toothache, American drugstores had just the thing: cocaine toothache drops. Yes, cocaine for children. Marketed openly, sold cheerfully, printed with pictures of happy kids playing. The pitch was that they'd numb the pain and put the little ones in a wonderful mood. And I bet they absolutely did. Parents were dosing their toddlers with hard drugs and calling it good parenting. No prescription, no eyebrow raised, just cocaine on aisle 3 next to the candy. And people wonder why the good old days were so cheerful. Everyone was quietly, medically, completely out of their minds. 23. The Roanoke colony was England's big attempt to settle America, packed with over 100 people building a whole new life. Then a supply ship returns after a few years and finds nothing. No people, no bodies, no struggle. The entire colony just gone, vanished into thin air. The only clue left behind was a single word carved into a wooden post: Croatoan. That's it. No explanation, no follow-up, just a spooky word and 100 missing people. Historians have argued about it for 400 years and still don't know. An entire town rage quit reality and left one cryptic sticky note. Peak mysterious exit, honestly. 24. During the Salem witch trials, the hysteria got so completely unhinged that the good people of Salem put a dog on trial. A dog. They accused it of witchcraft, held proceedings, and then executed the animal as a witch. Somewhere there was a courtroom, presumably with straight faces, deciding whether a dog had made a pact with Satan. The dog, I assume, offered no defense, being a dog. This is the same legal system that condemned dozens of humans on the word of screaming teenagers. When your justice system is executing golden retrievers for sorcery, it might be time to reevaluate a few things. 25. Wrong way. Corrigan filed a flight plan to fly from New York to California, a nice, normal, westward trip. Then he took off and landed in Ireland. Ireland, the complete opposite direction, across an entire ocean. When he stepped off the plane, instead of admitting he'd made the most catastrophic navigational error in aviation history, he looked everyone dead in the eye and insisted he'd simply meant to fly to California and his compass must have been off. Sure, buddy, you accidentally crossed the Atlantic. He rode that ridiculous lie all the way to fame. Commitment to the bit, genuinely unmatched. Compass reading, somewhat questionable. 26. The Segway was going to change the world. Its creator promised it would redesign entire cities, that architects would build around it, that this was the future of how humanity moves. The hype was astronomical. Then it launched, and it turned out to be a slow, dorky scooter that cost a fortune and made you look like a mall cop. Cities were not redesigned. Civilization did not reorganize itself. It became one of the most legendary flops in tech history, beloved only by tourists rolling awkwardly past monuments. They promised a transportation revolution and delivered a punchline with handlebars. The future arrived, tripped, and fell off. 27. Custer rode into the Battle of Little Bighorn badly outnumbered. The enemy had him vastly overpowered before a single shot was fired. Any reasonable commander would keep every man close and pray. Custer, brimming with confidence, decided to do the opposite. He split his already tiny, outmatched force into pieces, divided the little he had against overwhelming odds for no good reason. The result was exactly what you'd expect. His command was completely wiped out in under an hour. Custer's last stand is really Custer's last terrible decision. He looked at a losing hand and chose to fold it into origami. Textbook confidence, textbook catastrophe. 28. Calvin Coolidge ran the White House like a very strange petting zoo. His pet of choice? A raccoon, named Rebecca. A live raccoon, roaming the presidential residence, which he adored, and walked around like a dog. And for exercise, this president rode a mechanical electric horse, an early motorized bucking machine, bouncing away in his office for his health. So picture it, the leader of the free world gently vibrating on a robot horse while a raccoon watches from the corner. That's a real president. That happened. Somehow this is less unhinged than half the other entries on this list, which tells you everything. 29. The makers of E.T. came to M&M's with an offer. Let your candy be the treat that lures the world's most beloved alien. Free placement in what would become a massive blockbuster. And M&M's said no, passed on it, thought it wasn't worth the trouble. So the filmmakers walked over to Reese's Pieces instead. And when that movie exploded, so did the candy, with sales skyrocketing overnight. M&M's handed a golden fortune to their direct competitor because they couldn't be bothered. The most famous alien in film history became a walking ad for the company that said yes. Somewhere, a marketing exec is still crying into a bowl. 30. For years, cigarette companies had a brilliant sales pitch, and it went like this. More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. That was a real ad. Doctors. They put physicians in white coats in the advertisements, using the literal authority of medicine to sell you lung cancer. Your doctor smokes it, so it must be healthy, right? People bought it, figuratively and literally. An entire nation lit up on the recommendation of science, while the science was quietly killing them. Nothing builds trust like a doctor prescribing you a slow death by the carton. The good old days really were just marketing with better hair. 31. The Donner Party wanted a faster route west, so they took a shortcut. A guy in a book swore would save them tons of time. It did not. The shortcut was longer, harder, and deadlier, dragging them straight into the mountains right as winter slammed shut around them. Trapped in the snow, out of food, freezing, they eventually resorted to the one thing nobody ever wants to be famous for: eating each other. All because they trusted a travel tip from a man who'd never actually taken the road. The ultimate lesson in always read the reviews before choosing the scenic route. Catastrophic detour, historic consequences. 32. Everyone loves to mock the lady who sued McDonald's over hot coffee. The poster child for frivolous lawsuits, right? Except here's what your smug uncle left out. That coffee was served so scalding it gave her third-degree burns. Third degree. She needed skin grafts. She was hospitalized for days. McDonald's had been warned hundreds of times that their coffee was dangerously, unnecessarily hot, and did nothing. The frivolous joke everyone repeats was actually a woman horrifically injured by corporate negligence. The real punchline is that we all laughed at her instead of the company. Turns out the frivolous ones were us, parroting a lie for decades. 33. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge opened in 1940, a proud feat of American engineering, gleaming and new. Then a light breeze showed up. Not a hurricane, not a storm, a mild everyday wind. And that bridge began to ripple, twist, and undulate like a ribbon in the air, wobbling so violently that it tore itself completely apart and collapsed into the water below. Months after opening, because of a breeze. The engineers built a multi-million-dollar bridge with all the structural integrity of a wet noodle. It's now the most famous engineering failure ever filmed, studied by every student as exactly what not to do. Gentle wind, 1, bridge, 0, 34. The Ford Pinto had a small design issue. If someone tapped it from behind, the gas tank could explode. Rear-end collision, sudden fireball, that kind of thing. Now, Ford knew. They had the memos. And here's the truly grotesque part. Internal calculations determined it would be cheaper to just pay out for the resulting deaths and injuries than to fix the actual car. They ran the math on human lives, decided burning was more affordable, and shipped it anyway. That's not negligence, that's a spreadsheet deciding you're expendable. Ford looked at exploding customers and saw a rounding error. Cost-benefit analysis has never been more chillingly literal. 35. In 1859, the United States and Britain nearly went to war over an island, and the whole thing kicked off because of a pig. An American shot a British pig that was rooting around in his garden. That's it. That's the incident. Both sides got so worked up over this deceased pig that they sent troops, aimed cannons, and stood on the brink of actual bloodshed over breakfast bacon. The tension dragged on for years. And the grand total of casualties from the entire pig war? One pig. The pig. Two global powers mobilized their militaries, and the only thing that died was the original pig. Diplomacy at its finest. 36. Ulysses S. Grant, Civil War hero, President of the United States, one of the most powerful men alive, got pulled over for speeding. In a horse-drawn buggy. He was tearing through the streets of Washington a little too fast in his carriage, and a police officer flagged down the actual sitting president and wrote him up. And to Grant's credit, he took the fine like a man. But let that image live in your head. The commander-in-chief, getting a speeding ticket from a horse. The most powerful man in America humbled by a guy on the beat doing his job. Even presidents can't outrun traffic law. 37. In 1985, Coca-Cola looked at being the most beloved soft drink on earth and thought, let's change everything. They scrapped their century-old formula and rolled out new Coke, confident the public would adore it. The public did not adore it. The public revolted. People hoarded old Coke, flooded the company with furious calls, and treated it like a national betrayal, as if Coca-Cola had personally insulted their grandmother. The backlash was so total that Coke crawled back to the original formula within months, humiliated. They took the #1 product in the world and tried to fix what wasn't broken. Sometimes the dumbest move is touching the thing that's working. 38. In the 1800s, Americans went absolutely wild for phrenology, the science of judging your entire character by feeling the bumps on your skull. And they took it seriously. Employers would run their fingers over a job applicant's head and decide, based on the lumps, whether you were honest, intelligent, or a born criminal. Your whole future determined by scalp topography. People made real decisions, hiring, marriage, justice, off a head massage dressed up as science. Imagine losing a job because a man didn't like the shape of the back of your head. This was considered cutting edge. The bar for science was apparently located underground. 39. Kellogg's Corn Flakes and graham crackers share a deeply weird origin story. Both were invented as bland, boring health foods specifically designed to suppress people's, let's say, impure urges. That's right. The cereal in your bowl was engineered by men who believed that if food tasted exciting, it would lead to sinful behavior, so they made it as flavorless as possible on purpose. The blander the breakfast, the purer the soul, apparently. So every sad, dry cornflake was a tiny moral crusade against human desire. You're not eating breakfast, you're eating a 19th century abstinence pamphlet. And somehow it became a beloved classic anyway. Willpower, in flake form. 40. The 1919 Chicago White Sox were one of the best baseball teams in the country. Talented, favored, poised to win the World Series. So naturally, several of them decided to lose it on purpose. Gamblers paid them off, and these players deliberately threw the biggest games of their lives, botching plays and blowing chances so the moneymen could cash in. They got caught, got banned from baseball forever, and earned the eternal nickname the Black Sox. They had glory, fame, and a championship in reach, and traded it all for a bribe. Nothing says sports legend like being remembered solely for cheating your own fans. Immortal for all the wrong reasons. 41. A man named Joshua Norton lost his fortune, snapped, and did what any reasonable person would do. He declared himself Emperor of the United States. Just appointed himself royalty, printed his own money, issued official decrees, and strutted around San Francisco in a fancy uniform demanding respect. And here's the beautiful part. The entire city played along. For 21 years. Restaurants gave him free meals, his fake currency was accepted, newspapers printed his royal announcements. An entire city collectively agreed to humor one delusional man for 2 decades. Honestly, best-run monarchy America ever had. He hurt no one, ruled with imaginary grace, and everyone just let him. Peak civic kindness or peak collective madness? Both. 42. Howard Hughes decided to build the largest airplane ever made, and he built it entirely out of wood, earning it the mocking nickname the Spruce Goose. It was a colossal, absurd, magnificent flying lumberyard, soaking up a fortune and years of obsessive effort. Everyone doubted it could even leave the ground, and in a way they were right. The Spruce Goose flew exactly once. One time, for under a mile, barely above the water, before it was parked forever and never flew again. A staggering mountain of money and genius, all for a single brief hop. The most expensive one and done in aviation history. It flew just enough to technically prove the haters wrong, then quit. 43. In the War of 1812, America looked north at Canada and figured, easy win, let's grab it. The confidence was sky high. Just march in, plant the flag, done by dinner. Canada, apparently, did not get the memo. American forces invaded expecting a cakewalk and instead got thrown back and back and back again, repeatedly humiliated by the country they assumed would roll over. The easy conquest turned into an embarrassing series of defeats against their polite northern neighbor. Turns out you can't just annex a nation because you're feeling optimistic. America bit off Canada and chipped a tooth. The maple leaf remained gloriously, stubbornly unconquered. 44. President William Howard Taft was a large man, and at some point the White House faced a genuine engineering challenge. A bathtub big enough for him. The solution was a custom tub so enormous that 4 grown men could comfortably fit inside it all at once. 4. Simultaneously, they built the president a personal swimming pool disguised as a bathtub. Picture the plumbing meeting where someone had to sketch that out and keep a straight face. It became one of the most famous facts about his entire presidency. Not his policies, not his laws, but the legendary bathtub that could seat a small committee. A lasting legacy, if a slightly damp one. 45. In 1975, a man named Gary Dahl looked at ordinary garden rocks. Literal rocks, free, everywhere, worth nothing, and decided to sell them as pet rocks for $4 each. He put them in little boxes with air holes and an instruction manual, and then he watched the money pour in. People bought them, millions of them. He became a millionaire in a matter of months, selling pebbles to grown adults, who then named them and showed them to friends. There was no trick, no gimmick beyond the packaging, just rocks. He didn't fool anyone, people knew. The real genius and the real punchline was all of us. Never underestimate a good box. 46. Take a look at number 39's cereal cousins and then meet the fuller picture. Graham crackers and cornflakes weren't the only health foods born from this crusade. But the crusade itself is the joke. 19th century wellness gurus were convinced that pleasure was the enemy, that a tasty meal was a gateway to sin, and that the cure for human desire was aggressively boring food. So they engineered blandness as a moral weapon. Eat this flavorless brick, cleanse your wicked soul. It's diet culture, purity panic, and pseudoscience baked into a single sad snack. And people bought in completely. Turns out you can sell anything if you convince folks it makes them holier. 47. For decades, American mapmakers looked at the Great Plains, some of the most fertile, productive farmland on the entire planet, and confidently labeled it the Great American Desert. A worthless wasteland, they declared, unfit for settlement, a barren nothing to be crossed as quickly as possible. They put it on official maps, warned people away from it. Meanwhile, that desert would go on to become the breadbasket of a nation, feeding millions and growing an ocean of wheat and corn. They stood on some of the richest soil in the world and called it a dead zone, a geographic swing and a miss so wide it echoed for generations. 48. In 1971, a man calling himself D.B. Cooper boarded a plane, calmly hijacked it, and demanded $200,000 in ransom. He got it. And then, mid-flight, somewhere over the wilderness, he strapped on a parachute, opened the rear door, and jumped out of the plane into the dark night sky, with all the cash. And that was it. He was never seen again. Not caught, not identified, not found, dead or alive. The single most successful mystery hijacker in American history vanished into thin air and became a legend. Decades of investigation, zero answers. Somewhere, either a skeleton or a very smug retiree is holding the only real ending. 49. On a clear day in 1876, over a farm in Kentucky, chunks of raw meat began falling from the sky. Not rain, not hail. Meat. Actual pieces of flesh drifting down from a cloudless blue heaven for several minutes, scattering across the field like the world's most horrifying weather event. People understandably lost their minds. Some brave, or deeply unwise. Souls even tasted it to identify what it was. The leading theory involves vultures vomiting mid-flight in unison, which is somehow both an explanation and a fresh nightmare. The Kentucky meat shower is a real documented event. The sky opened up and served lunch, and nobody ordered it. 50. The DeLorean was supposed to be the car of the future. Sleek, stainless steel, gull-wing doors, pure cool. It looked like it drove out of a science fiction film, and it flopped so spectacularly, so completely, that the entire company collapsed within about 2 years of the car ever launching. All that hype, all that futuristic swagger, gone almost immediately. The only reason anyone remembers the DeLorean at all is because a movie later strapped a fake time machine to it and made it a pop culture icon. Without Hollywood's pity, it would have vanished into total obscurity. The car built for tomorrow barely survived until the day after tomorrow, 51. At Fort Sumter, the Civil War officially kicked off, and after all the bombardment, the fort finally surrendered. The battle was over. Nobody had died in the actual fighting. An incredibly bloody war that would kill hundreds of thousands began with a clean scoreboard. And then, during a ceremonial salute after the surrender, a cannon misfired and killed a soldier. So the first man to die in the Civil War died after the shooting stopped, during a polite gun salute, by accident. Not in combat, in the celebration of combat ending. The deadliest war in American history opened its body count with a clumsy ceremonial oops. Grim, pointless, and painfully on brand. 52. When America bought Alaska from Russia, in 1867 for $7.2 million, the entire country howled with laughter. They called it Seward's Folly, mocking the man who bought it as a fool who'd wasted money on a frozen, worthless icebox, a giant, useless block of snow nobody could possibly want. The jokes wrote themselves. Then Alaska turned out to be stuffed with gold, oil, and staggering natural wealth worth untold billions, becoming one of the greatest bargains in the history of nations. The worthless icebox printed money for a century. Everyone who laughed looked like the real fool. Seward's Folly aged into Seward's Flex, and nobody's laughing now. 53. In the 1990s, America collectively lost its mind over Beanie Babies, small stuffed animals filled with beans. And I don't mean people thought they were cute. I mean grown adults treated them as serious financial investments, spending hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars, genuinely convinced these plush toys would appreciate in value and fund their retirement. They kept them in plastic cases. They protected the little tags like stock certificates. Then the bubble burst, and the investments became worth exactly what they were, $5 toys. Entire savings poured into beanbag animals. People planned their golden years around a fabric penguin named Waddles. The economy of delusion, stitched together and stuffed with beans. 54. The term snake oil, the ultimate name for a fraudulent cure, comes from a man named Clark Stanley, who got rich selling his famous snake oil liniment, swearing it was packed with the healing power of genuine rattlesnake. People bought it by the bottle to cure whatever ailed them. Then, someone finally tested the stuff, and here's the perfect twist. It contained no snake oil at all. None. Not a drop. The man who literally invented snake oil as a product didn't even put snake oil in it. He outfrauded the very fraud that bears his name. That's not just a con, that's poetry. A liar so complete he lied about his own lie. 55. Jamestown, one of the first English settlements in America, nearly starved to death. And a big reason why is almost too stupid to believe. Many of the settlers who came over were gentlemen, aristocrats who considered manual labor beneath their noble dignity. So when it came time to, grow food to not die, they simply refused. Farming was for peasants. These fine gentlemen would rather waste away digging for gold that wasn't there than lower themselves to plant a vegetable. And waste away they did. A colony crippled not by weather or war, but by pure snobbery. They nearly died of dignity. Starvation by ego. Party of one. 56. In 1849, New York City erupted into a deadly riot. And the cause was, brace yourself, an argument over which actor was better at performing Shakespeare. That's it. Two rival actors had competing fan bases. Tensions boiled over, and the debate escalated into a full-blown violent mob in the streets. By the end, roughly 25 people were dead. Dead over Shakespeare. Over whose Macbeth had better delivery. People lost their actual lives because theater fans couldn't agree on acting technique. It's the deadliest case of, well, that's just like your opinion, in history. Somewhere, a drama critic realized their review had a body count. To be, or not to be, indeed. 57. Sarah Winchester, heiress to the Winchester rifle fortune, became convinced she was haunted by the ghosts of everyone the rifles had killed. Her solution? Build. Constantly. She constructed a sprawling mansion and never stopped adding to it. deliberately filling it with staircases that lead nowhere, doors that open onto blank walls, and hallways that dead-end for no reason, all supposedly to confuse and trap the vengeful spirits. Construction continued around the clock for decades. The result is an architectural fever dream, a house designed by paranoia itself. She spent a fortune building a labyrinth to outsmart ghosts. Either the most elaborate haunted house defense ever, or the world's most expensive misunderstanding. Possibly both. 58. Asbestos was once marketed as a miracle material, fireproof, versatile, cheap, and Americans stuffed it into absolutely everything without a second thought. Walls, pipes, insulation, you name it. But here's the truly cursed part. They also used it as fake snow. That fluffy, magical snow falling in old Hollywood films and sprinkled on cheerful Christmas displays. Frequently asbestos. They coated holiday scenes in a deadly carcinogen and called it festive. Children played in it. Actors breathed it in while singing about the holidays. The most wholesome imagery of the era was quietly poisonous. Nothing says happy holidays like a gentle snowfall of lung disease. The miracle material was a slow-motion catastrophe. 59. In World War II, the U.S. Army deployed a secret weapon called the Ghost Army, and its arsenal was pure theater. Instead of real tanks, they used inflatable rubber ones. Instead of real troops, they blasted giant speakers, playing the recorded sounds of a massive army on the move. The entire unit was a life-sized bluff, designed to trick the Germans into thinking a huge force was somewhere it wasn't. And it worked. The enemy chased a fake army made of balloons and sound effects. Hundreds of soldiers whose job was essentially elaborate cosplay with strategic intent. They defeated the enemy with props. Best improv performance in military history, no contest. 60. John Quincy Adams, sitting President of the United States, had a habit of swimming completely naked in the Potomac River at the crack of dawn. No guards, no clothes, just the commander-in-chief skinny dipping before breakfast. And legend has it a determined reporter named Anne Royal, unable to get an interview any other way, marched down to the riverbank, gathered up his clothes, and sat on them, refusing to budge until the naked president answered her questions. Trapped and exposed in the water, he supposedly had no choice but to grant history's most awkward interview. Whether or not the clothes part is true, the naked swimming absolutely was. Presidential dignity, temporarily submerged. 61. Pets.com was the poster child of .com insanity. Fueled by investor cash, it torched an absolute fortune on marketing. A pricey Super Bowl ad, a giant balloon floating in the Macy's parade, a beloved sock puppet mascot everyone recognized. They spent like a company printing money. There was just one tiny problem. They weren't actually making any. The business bled cash on every order, selling pet supplies for less than it cost to ship them. And so, within about 9 months of its splashy public debut, the whole thing collapsed spectacularly. All that fame, that puppet, that Super Bowl glory, gone. They mastered advertising and completely forgot the part where you earn money. 62. In the 1850s, the U.S. Army faced a problem crossing the brutal, dry American Southwest, and someone pitched a bold solution: camels. Real camels. The Army seriously imported actual camels from across the world, figuring these desert experts would haul supplies through the arid terrain better than horses. And weirdly, it kind of worked. The camels were tough and thrived, but the soldiers hated them, the animals spooked the horses, and the whole U.S. Camel Corps quietly fizzled out. Some of the camels were just released into the desert, and people reported wild camels roaming the Southwest for decades. America genuinely tried to go full Sahara, and almost forgot to tell anyone. 63. Standard Oil grew so enormous, so ravenously dominant, that it didn't just lead the oil industry. It basically was the oil industry, swallowing competitors and choking out anyone who dared exist near it. It became such a colossal, monstrous monopoly that the Supreme Court of the United States had to step in and physically break it apart. Not into 2 or 3 pieces, into 34 separate companies. 34. One company was so overwhelmingly huge, it took the highest court in the land to shatter it into 3 dozen fragments. That's not a business. That's a kaiju. Some of those shattered pieces are still giant corporations today. Peak, too big to allow. 64. During the Dust Bowl, decades of reckless farming stripped the Great Plains bare, and the land got its revenge. Massive dust storms, walls of black soil thousands of feet high, rolled across the country, swallowing entire towns in choking darkness. But here's the truly staggering part. Some of these storms grew so enormous that the dirt from the plains traveled hundreds of miles and literally blackened the skies over Washington, D.C. Lawmakers looked out their windows and saw the ruined farmland of the heartland raining down on the Capitol. The land itself flew across the country to file a complaint. Nature sent Congress a very direct, very gritty memo. 65. In 1947, a team of engineers was working on an early computer when the machine started malfunctioning for no clear reason. They dug into the guts of the enormous contraption to find the culprit, and there it was. A real moth, an actual insect, trapped inside the hardware and gumming up the works. So they removed it, taped the little corpse directly into their logbook, and labeled it the first real computer bug. That's genuinely where the term comes from. Every time a programmer curses at a bug in their code today, they're unknowingly honoring one doomed moth that flew into history. A pest became the most used word in software, immortalized with tape. 66. Stonewall Jackson was a Confederate legend, one of the most feared and celebrated generals of the entire Civil War, a man who survived battle after brutal battle without a scratch. Bullets flew, cannons roared, and Jackson strode through it all untouched, seemingly invincible. And then, in the dark confusion of night, he was shot. Not by the enemy, but by his own soldiers who mistook him for a threat in the gloom and gunned down their own commander. The great untouchable warrior, felled by friendly fire from the men who idolized him. He conquered 100 enemies and was undone by his own side's bad eyesight. The cruelest possible plot twist. 67. Andrew Johnson had one job on the day of his 1865 vice presidential inauguration: show up and look dignified in front of the entire nation. He did not do that. Instead, he arrived visibly, sloppily, embarrassingly drunk, slurring his words, rambling incoherently, making a spectacle of himself at one of the most solemn ceremonies in American government, with the whole country watching. He was so plastered that people were genuinely mortified in real time. This is the man who, weeks later, would become President of the United States after Lincoln's assassination. His grand introduction to the nation was a drunken mess on the biggest stage there is. Truly, an unforgettable first impression. 68. In 1869, workers dug up a 10-foot petrified giant, a supposed ancient stone man, and thousands of Americans lost their minds, flocking to pay money and gawk at this incredible fossil of a bygone titan. It was, of course, completely fake, a carved hunk of stone buried on purpose as a hoax. But here's the masterstroke. Showman P.T. Barnum wanted in, so when he couldn't buy the fake, he simply built a fake of the fake, a copy of a hoax, and made a fortune off it too. People paid to see a counterfeit of a counterfeit. Barnum out-scammed the original scammer. There's a sucker born every minute indeed. 69. Before he was president, Abraham Lincoln was a sharp country lawyer, and he won one of his most famous cases with a single brilliant move. A key witness swore he'd clearly seen the defendant commit murder by the bright light of the moon. Airtight testimony. Except Lincoln calmly pulled out a farmer's almanac and showed the court that on that exact night, the moon was barely there, low and dim, nowhere near bright enough to see by. The star witness was demolished by a cheap little weather book. Lincoln didn't out-argue him, he out-researched him. One almanac, one dramatic reveal, one shattered case. The original, well, actually, and it saved a man's life. 70. In 1870, an inventor named Alfred Beach secretly built a subway underneath Broadway in New York City. And I mean secretly, digging in the dark without proper permission, powered by a giant fan that literally blew the train car through the tunnel like a pea through a straw. It was a genuine, working, air-powered subway years ahead of its time. There was just one small issue. It ran for exactly one block. One. Then the funding and permissions collapsed. The project was abandoned, and the whole marvelous tunnel was sealed up and forgotten. A visionary glimpse of the future, quietly buried after a single city block. The little subway that almost could. 71. President Benjamin Harrison moved into the White House right as it got a thrilling new upgrade. Electric lights, modern, magical, the future itself flowing through the walls. There was just one problem. Harrison was absolutely terrified of them. Convinced he'd be electrocuted the moment he touched a switch, the President of the United States flat out refused to operate the lights himself. So he and his wife would simply leave them blazing all night rather than risk flipping a switch and wait for the staff to turn them off. The most powerful man in the country, defeated by a light switch. He could command an army but not a lamp. A truly shocking lack of nerve. And there you have it. 71 glorious disasters your textbooks tried to pass off as history with a completely straight face. From radioactive tonics to ghost-proof mansions to a president scared of a light switch, humanity really said, "Hold my beer," and never looked back. So tell me down in the comments, which one made your jaw hit the floor the hardest? Which idiot deserves the crown? If this made you laugh, snort, or question everything you learned in school, smash that like button. Subscribe to Dumbest Things so you never miss the next batch of magnificent stupidity, and share it with someone who needs it. Stay curious, and stay smarter than these legends. See you next time.